All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us wherever you happen to be. Very excited to talk to you all today. Really appreciate everybody taking time out. I know it's always hard to find time to go to these types of things, and we're all back to back on Zoom meetings these days. So we really do appreciate you spending some time with us. So today we're going to spend some time talking about security operations. Right, as a Mission is a cloud service provider, we help customers use AWS effectively, and so as a result, we get lots and lots of questions around security and around compliance. It's a constant topic. Every customer is concerned about it. And we tend to see trends in these conversations that come up a lot of times having to discuss what are security operations, what is a security operations center, how do I build one, how expensive are they, right? These types of things. So we got together with one of our key partners, AlertLogic. AlertLogic's Bharath, almost 20 years old now, MDR.
20 years next year.
20 years next year. So they've been in the business for a long time. I've worked with them for years and years and years, delivering services for customers. And we really wanted to get together and really talk a little bit about this. What does it take to build a security operation? What do customers mean when they do that? What do you have to think about if you want to go build one of these things? And then what does it look like from the other side of things when you're a security service provider, right? What does it look like to build a service capable of actually delivering on behalf of customers? But before we get started, we did just want to talk a little bit about why the heck you should pay attention to us, right? So my name's Jarret Raim. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer here at Mission. I'm also the security practice lead, right? So I own internal security compliance. I also own customer-facing products and services. Right, so my background's in development. I'm a dev. My degrees are in computer science. I've done security product management, built a bunch of managed services. I built and launched 2 managed detection response offers, right? So operations that deliver security outcomes on behalf of customers. And now I'm kind of on the other side of the table, and I'm responsible for securing that mission infrastructure and, by extension, our mission clouds. We also have Bharath here. Bharath, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So Bharath Vasudevan's same sort of background, except mine's been spread between IT and cybersecurity. Again, classically trained engineer, engineering degrees, the whole bit. Spent a lot of time, working on just designing things, and really the progression has moved from solving technical problems to solving customer problems. That's really been the approach here, and the spending some time with Mission or Logic, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun in how to, help surface some of the challenges that you guys are facing and really give you some innovative solutions to address them.
Excellent. Awesome. So you got 2 guys here who spent a bunch of time in security and IT land. Both of us have built security operations. Both of us have been on the other side of the table as well. So hopefully to give you a little bit of insight into what we see and how to think about these things. And one of the pieces that you'll get at the end of this is the model that I use to build the numbers that you're going to see today. So of course, every model has assumptions, right? And you'll see some of those assumptions that we made, but we wanted to give you the model so you can go in and plug your own numbers in and come to your own conclusions, right? To be honest, I don't think that will change the overarching conversation we're going to have today, because while the numbers move around a little bit, they don't change by orders of magnitude. But we did want to make sure that you guys don't have to just trust us, right? You can poke in that data yourself. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. So we really wanted to level set for a second on why we hear so many conversations about security operations, right? And I think most people know this, but over the last 5 to 10 years, we continually see an increase in cybersecurity attacks, right? This isn't news to anybody, right? You pay attention to the news. If you're in the security industry, we're constantly seeing both an increase in frequency of attacks, but also increase in sophistication of those attacks, even before ransomware really made it very, very profitable to be on the bad side of this particular equation. Right. At the same time, we're seeing our businesses continue to increase their usage of IT services, right? Certainly using tons of SaaS and getting into machine learning and AI and all the various other kind of IT functions designed to help the business achieve its objectives. But that does just increase the complexity and the speed at which those organizations are moving, all of which can sometimes challenge us on the security side of things to keep up. Right. So if there was ever a time when buying a bunch of tools and turning them on was going to be successful from a security operations perspective, that time is long gone. So we really see customers starting to think about, how do I protect my organization? What is required to detect advanced adversaries and protect against them? Not only the flavor of the month in ransomware, but all the different types of attacks that we can see in organizations. And that's really driving a lot of this conversation around MDR. So much so that Gartner said recently in their 2020 guide that 50% of organizations will be using MDR services kind of going forward. And we've seen that all the way from small, medium businesses all the way up through enterprise. So Bharath, obviously you guys spend a lot more time in this this market than we do. Any interesting trends there or pieces that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so well, one is, if I look at your first two bullets there, the attacks increase in frequency and the attacks are becoming more sophisticated. I think the other thing that we're seeing too is almost a democratization, this like ransomware as a service, where you don't even need to be smart. You just go hire the people that are, all the way through with like tech support departments to teach you how to pay. So, they're turning it into big business. And the other piece here with the Gartner stats, so we do spend a lot of time with Gartner as well. One of the acknowledgments that they've made is that there is a need across every size organization for the type of outcomes that MDR delivers. The larger you are from an organization perspective, the more budget you have, the more you can go hire your own people and figure out everything. You can go do it yourself, but the need exists everywhere. And where you can't, that's where MDR services can help you. And that's really their acknowledgement that this is a need that everybody has. If you're big, you can go solve it yourself. If you're small, you might need some help.
Yeah, absolutely. And at my previous role, when I built an MDR, we even saw a lot of really large enterprises who had make big investments in security operations. They had a SOC, they had all the stuff that we're going to talk about today. And what they looked at was that, well, the types of things that MDR can do, MDR services can specialize in. And so they can deliver that service at a lot cheaper rate than building up the capability internally. So we saw a lot of folks who were saying, hey, look, I'm actually going to offload some of this capability to an MDR so that I can take my people and focus them on business specific tasks where I can get a lot more value.
Right? And we've seen plenty of that with our more security sophisticated customers.
For sure. All right. So when customers get into thinking about security operations, of course, it comes to this build versus buy discussion, right? Sometimes you can go out to the market and look at pricing and get a little bit of a shell shock and be like, oh, I could hire a whole person or two for that, right? And so what we wanted to really talk through is, well, what is a SOC? If you wanted to build one yourself, what would it look like, right? And what are the types of people and processes and tools that need to be involved? Right. So our objective today really is to talk about what does it take to build a modern security operation, right? That being defined as an operation capable of detecting both commodity attacks of malware all the way up to more advanced attacks, and then being able to respond to them. Right. When I go and talk to CISOs, and as a CISO myself, right, the two questions that I ask or I see asked a lot is, if I was being attacked, would I know it? Right. And if I knew it, could I do something about it? Right. And if either of those things are not true, I'm in a world of hurt. Right. And so the goal there is to say, how can we build an operation that's capable of doing that? Right. And so when we look at that, the best way that I've always thought about from stealing a lot of good ideas from people smarter than me is to think about the capabilities that you need in the SOC. A lot of times what we see is customers really pigeonholing on tools first. Right, that the most important thing that you go do is choose what tool you're going to use to deliver the capability. And in reality, you should first start by thinking about all the things that need to actually be there for you to be capable. Right, I've always said that I would much rather have a talented security operations center and nothing but open source and free tooling than the best tooling that money can buy and not have the people that run it. Right, so if you go out and spend hundreds of $1,000s on an enterprise security tool, but you don't have the expertise to run it, right, then you're not going to be super effective. Right. And so one of the big differentiators that MDRs can kind of bring to the table is that most MDRs build their own tooling. Right. So, Bharath, I don't know if you wanted to talk about this. This is obviously the path that AlertLogic takes, but there's a lot of benefits to kind of owning your own tooling rather than using somebody else's.
Well, the trap that we see a lot of prospects and customers walk into is they really do focus on capabilities and they kind of lose sight of outcomes. So, yes, this tool can promise these capabilities, but in the same framework you have here, well, if you don't have the people or the process to take advantage of the tools, well, I mean, that's it. That's going to be shelfware for you. So absolutely. And our approach has really been to build all of our own tools, which is different than some of the more MSSP-like approaches where, they're taking this SIM vendor, they're taking this vulnerability vendor, and they're managing that for a customer, which again has its benefits in terms of like helping you get to where you want. But now if we're starting to tune efficiency, building in the telemetry, it's great when you're the people that build it, you're the people that have the threat intelligence, and you're doing the last mile with the SOC. When all of those things work together, it really drives to better outcomes. And yes, it can bring some of the same capabilities. But again, when you put those things together, how does that manifest in an outcome?
Yeah, For sure. When I built my last MDR, we really saw that kind of virtuous cycle of the SOC is delivering the tool in customer environments. They're seeing attacks, they're seeing capabilities, they're going directly back to the engineering teams and going, we need this to protect customers and we need it now, right? And they could get it as opposed to trying to get on somebody's roadmap who may not care that much about you, right?
Let me just
So,
give you one quick example, right? So we see an active vulnerability being exploited. There is a breach. We have detected the breach. We know which vector it came in on. It may not be public, it may not be disclosed, it may be something like a 0-day, but we know kind of the path that it took. We also know how many of our other customers have a very similar look and feel. Well, we can actually just pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, there is an active exploit with something that you have in your environment because we've actively seen it. Just putting those pieces together is something that is very difficult to do if you don't have those pieces working together in harmony.
for sure. Absolutely. All right. So as we go and look at that wider view of the SOC, like we really need to start by looking at the people. As we all know, people are going to be the most expensive component of your SOC. They're really the most expensive component of every operation that you want to deliver, right? They're, security folks are hard to hire and retain. Bharath, I'm sure you and I could spend hours talking about how hard, but certainly a difficult area to hire these days. So, a big decision around it is around 24/7 coverage. We really think and see some customers really thinking that, well, maybe we'll just do SOC during first shift and some of those types of things. And look, that approach can still have value, but modern security operations are all about being proactive, right? If you're sitting back and you're waiting for a tool to tell you that something's wrong in the environment, then you will miss the adversary, right? That's why you see, modern tactics like threat hunting and various other components where you're actually going out and looking for adversarial behavior. And so if you're not 24/7, you're sitting on a pager, then you're functionally waiting for the tool to tell you when you need to wake up. So, that drives a lot of staffing for customers, right? At an MDR scale, like alert logic scale, they're long past having to staff for 24/7. They have to staff for scale because they have enough customers, right? But for a lot of our small customers, they're really focused on, oh man, I got to hire all these extra people because we want to be 24/7. But in addition to that, you really need to focus on not only continue hire and retaining these people, but keeping them up to speed, right? Life is changing at a rapid rate. Like at Mission, we focus entirely on the AWS platform. We do nothing else. And so just keeping people up to date on all the changes that happen in AWS is challenging, let alone doing that in the context of security. Right. And then, of course, you need to make sure that those analysts, those security people that you're going to spend all this money on, have the support that they need to be successful. Right. So and once you've got all those people, you have to develop the processes that are capable. So Bharath, you guys have a lot of experience in building SOCs. I'm curious what you think about how long it would take for an organization to get to an effective SOC, given let's say that they can hire all the people, they have all the stuff, but developing those processes, getting the bites at the apple, doing the exercises and practice it, how long do you think it takes for somebody to get to the point where they're actually kind of really capable as a SOC?
It would really depend on the support structure around them. So many of our customers have 3 people in their SOC, and then there's turnover, so you've lost 33% of your SOC. And not only are you filling that, but now you have to figure out all the tribal knowledge that walked out the door as well. One of the things that we've done is we've partnered with the local community college in Houston. There's another one that we partnered with in Wales, where we're basically creating a talent pipeline of people coming in out of cybersecurity programs, landing as an entry-level role in the SOC, growing, moving, growing, moving, growing, moving. So basically they're learning everything they need to. And ultimately, look, these people are going to move on. But if we can keep them for double, triple the industry average in terms of retention, there's a lot more institutional knowledge that will be developed and retained, such that when the next person has to come in, I'm not replacing a third, but I'm replacing a fraction. So, that's really how we look at it. But it's almost solving the talent shortage by creating your own talent pipeline.
Yeah, and one thing I've always seen as building MDRs is a lot of times security analysts would rather work in the MDR than work for a company or a business, right? Because in the MDR, they're going to be seeing the most advanced attacks. They're going to have the best support. They're going to have access to the best tooling, right? And as an analyst, that's kind of the fun part, right? You want to go toe to toe with the bad guy. You don't want to be sitting around like arguing about compliance reports, right? And so, we always find it, customers sometimes find it difficult to hire security analysts because they all want to go work at MDRs, right?
The other cool thing we've seen too is kind of that progression. The other thing, the career options, right? I get to now work with the threat intel team. I get to walk them through the detection. I have to, and so basically as we're putting telemetry in place, that's an analyst function that you don't get to do if you're not at a company like this. So again, it's a little bit more fulfilling as well, which again helps with retention, which is a problem that everybody is dealing with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's say we spent some time thinking about it. We've really talked about people, processes, and technology here. So let's think about what an organization looks like. So what do we mean when we say SOC, right? And as Bharath mentioned earlier, sometimes you see these folks that are like, I've got like 2 people in my SOC, right? And it's like, well, that's not really a SOC. Or at least it's not an effective one, right? So when you think about a security operation, everything in that blue box that you see there in the center is kind of what I would tend to think of as what goes into a security operation. And I'm sure I'm missing people. I don't have third-party vendor analysis in here, and some of those things I'm sure, Bharath, you have your own opinions too. But at a high level, you need to have someone who can lead a SOC. An operational leader with SOC experience is not an easy person to hire, and is not always the same as your CISO. Right. So sometimes your CISO is a very business focused role. They may, have a more executive presence as opposed to someone that you might need who's an operator, who's actually operated something on a 24/7 basis. Right. And that can be a different, different folks. But given that you have the leadership, then you see security operations, right? That's what people think about when they think of SOCs. These are your security analysts, right? The men and women who are going to go and actually catch the alerts, do the investigations, do the hunting, all those capabilities, right? But then you got a lot of other folks in the SOC to support them. So defensive infrastructure, which is kind of IT dedicated to security, vulnerability management, threat intelligence, compliance folks, data protection, AppSec, right? We'll talk a little bit more in depth in these in a minute here, but you can see all these different specialties. Right, it's one of the other things that we see with customers with really small SOCs, or thinking about building a SOC of 2, 3, 4 people. You're not necessarily going to have people who are experts in the various different things that you want, right? So somebody plays Alert Logic where I've got dozens or hundreds of analysts. I can throw a rock and say, hey, I need someone who knows about malware analysis on OS X, and I can find that person. Whereas for most customers or most organizations building a small SOC, that would be impossible, right? And of course, all those sit on your tools and infrastructure. We'll talk about in a second. But I think one of the things that we see customers really miss when they think about building a SOC is all of the work that it's going to take from the rest of the business. Not only are SOCs expensive to build, but they really do take a lot of focus from a leadership perspective because it consumes a lot of effort. So you've got legal involved, not only to focus on how does security interface with the rest of the business and how the business needs to talk to its customers around security, but also just purchasing contracts and insurance and all the various other things that comes with delivering cybersecurity. Of course, a big partnership in IT. Almost nothing happens in security without IT being involved. So there's always a deep partnership there, right? PR is always one I put on here. Customers sometimes look at me a little funny and it's like, look, the last thing you want to do is be meeting your PR folks during an incident, right? You really want to understand who those folks are, have that capability in place, have drilled and exercised the ability of what are you going to say to your customers and how if there's a security incident. How do you talk to your board? How do you talk to investors? How do you talk to how do you talk to the press, right? All the various other people that might care. Right. Another one I see customers or security folks sometimes, not think about as much is sales and marketing. All of us now are selling products to other folks, and those folks are now paying an increasing attention to security, and they're going to start asking you questions. How many of us have seen the spreadsheet of doom where they send you the giant, Excel spreadsheet with 400 questions about your security posture that you need to fill out? Right. So it's critical as a security operation to understand that you are supporting sales and marketing. And if you do a bad job and they stop selling, guess who's going to be on the block for it? And it's not going to be them. Right. Sourcing, of course, you got to buy and maintain a lot of tooling and understand all of your vendor relationship. And then, of course, you have a lot of interfacing with corporate compliance. There's a lot of overlap with our IT and technology compliance. Right. So there's a lot of folks here. Bharath, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add here, folks that I may have forgotten to name check here.
It's not even just folks, but we talked about people here, but let me just take one small second to talk about process, right? You've got vulnerability management, you've got security operations, and you've got IT. The intersection of all of that is a patching program, which is not the easiest thing for an organization to go do, especially if you've got a small security wing, right? Your voice at the table is going to be muted. It's going to be sidelined. Even some bigger organizations that are IT forward that moved to O365, and you even ask them, hey, when did you start talking about security? Was it pre-deployment or after there was an incident after you moved? And then you just get this coy look back at you. And I'm like, okay, got the answer to that one. But so patching is such a big deal, and it's such a proactive measure that you can take. But if you don't have the processes in place, it's going to be very difficult to do that. So yes, these are all the people in your neighborhood, but then you also have to make sure that you got the processes in place to actually take action on some of the things that come up that get surfaced.
Yeah, 100%, right? And we've definitely seen the outcome of immature processes in the rest of the business driving an enormous amount of complexity and work into security, right? Compliance is a really easy example, right? Asking your security team to spend months going out taking screenshots of stuff because your IT infrastructure isn't automated or whatever it happens to be, right? Vulnerability management patching, obviously a very good example. Configuration management, hardening, those types of things. One thing I never see customers think about when they're building SOCs is threat intelligence, right? And those of us that have built SOCs for MDRs, it is probably almost more important than the analyst function, right? Like if you don't have threat intelligence, you don't know what's going on in the threat landscape, you literally can't do anything. You don't know what's coming at you. You don't know how to defend against it. You're always behind the 8 ball, right? And you're letting the adversary drive you instead of you really being proactive about your world. But threat intelligence is an easy thing to build, right? And it's different folks from your analyst folks, right? Those are different skill sets.
The other thing that we talked about kind of in the run up to this is if you don't have the people, a lot of times just outsourcing all of that to different tool vendors. So buying vulnerability management tools, buying threat intel tools, but then you're increasing the burden on your security operations team to be able to digest all that, process it, make sense of it, and then make it actionable. So it's one of those things that you have to look at it holistically. There's certain kind of smart ways to try to offload some of it, but all you're doing is you're shifting the burden somewhere else in the organization.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so let's get a little bit, start talking about brass tacks here. So what I did is, what we thought would be interesting actually is that I've built a couple of MDRs. Mission has its own model about how we think about 24/7 operations and security operations that I've used in the past. And obviously Alert Logic has a 20-year depth of experience in delivering these types of things. And Bharath had his own model. And so what we thought would be useful for you guys is to show you, okay, here's the outcomes of these two models developed completely independently. They have nothing to do with each other. And let's see how close they are, right? Because they're not going to be the same, of course. But let's see what assumptions that we make to give you an idea to be able to triangulate on, well, what are the real costs, right? So as we talked about, you first have some decisions to make about what type of operation you want to build, right? Do you want that operation to be 24/7 hands on keyboard, or do you want to do a page out or a call out? And do you understand the trade-offs that we're going to make there, right? Do you want to be resilient? Can your operations deal with someone leaving, as Bharath mentioned, or someone needing to go to, someone's sick, or someone's, going to a wedding or whatever? If you've only got 2 people or 3 people, then having one person out of commission for a while dramatically reduces your ability to actually be effective, right? And then finally, are you going to be proactive, or are you just going to catch tickets? Right? I think if you look at all the big breaches over the last 10 years, we can all say and understand that catching tickets isn't effective. It's not that these big companies didn't invest in security tooling; they had them. It's not that those big companies didn't invest in security operations; a lot of them had them, right? But if you're sitting back, you're just waiting for the tools to tell you what's happening in your environment, you're missing all of it, right? If you're not doing the threat intelligence, you're not doing the hunting, you're not doing the proactive analysis of the data, then you're just not going to find those adversaries, right? They're going to get around you. Right, so we split these into 4 possible kind of models here. And again, we're going to give you the spreadsheet. You can make up your own model or whatever. You don't have to trust us, but just for the sake of discussion, right? We had a minimal model, right? Which is really like, what's the minimum you could kind of get away with and actually get some business value out of, right? It's not going to be 24/7. It's not resilient. It's not proactive, but like it is valuable, right? It's not a waste of money, right? Then a lean team, like let's plus it up a little bit. Let's get enough so that we can be proactive. We're not just catching tickets, but we're still super lean, right? We're not really resilient. We're not 24/7 yet. All right, then finally, let's jump up to 24/7. What is the minimum we could do to cover shift, right? We're not resilient, right? People get sick. We're going to have a tough time covering shifts, right? But we're proactive now. We're 24/7 now. We're getting a lot of value. And then finally, I picked an example of an MDR operation, which is kind of what we would consider to be a fully staffed operation where you can get 24/7, resilient, and proactive. Now, in reality, as MDRs scale with number of customers, they're going to have far more people than we're talking about here. But just to give you something to get your teeth into, because obviously most organizations are not going to build, a SOC the size of Alert Logic's, right? Because they don't have to cover however many customers it is. All right, so let's take a look at what we mean when we talk about these things. So that minimal model, we talk about 5 total people, right? So for all of you, most of you probably already know, but if you don't, security analysts tend to come in 1, 2, and 3 flavors, right? That's pretty common across the industry. Obviously, you'll see some variation inside of companies. A lot of companies like to have 5 levels and whatever, but in general, security analysts 1, 2, and 3, pretty common, right? twos, you're getting that, probably 2 to 5 year experience range. Threes, you're getting above that, but you're also usually getting someone who's a little more specialized, right? Maybe they're a malware analysis person, or they're a Windows expert, or a network expert, or whatever it happens to be, right? And then you'll need some kind of manager or team lead to kind of run that team, right? So 5 is kind of that minimum is what we came up with for minimum staffing, right? Then we've got lean. We're plussing it up here. So you're adding some twos, you're adding some threes. You don't have single points of failure anymore. That's great, right? A little more expertise. You're up to 10 folks now, right? Full staffing, 17. So this is really barely covering 24/7. You're probably doing 12-hour shifting instead of 8-hour shifting. You're doing nights and weekends. You're asking a lot of your people. I would expect your turnover rates to be somewhat high if you went down this path, because that is a lot to ask of a team. They will be stretched to be able to really cover hands-on keyboard from that perspective. You'll have a lot of people waking up in the night when it's not their shift because you need their particular brand of expertise, and that can obviously get grading pretty quickly. And then kind of a fully staffed soccer MDR that really gets you down that path of being resilient. And you can see here we're mostly plussing up level ones, so you're really covering that low-level tickets, right? Making sure that you're getting the hunting moving, and then you got a good depth of twos. Threes at that point, from a size perspective, you're probably having to do some team leads. Sometimes those can double duty with your level threes, depends on who your folks are. But obviously 24 direct reports for a single manager is a bit much. So anyway, this is the model that we came up with. As I mentioned, you can make up your own. You don't have to trust us. But these are kind of some ballpark figures around the types of things that we talk about.
When we looked at a similar model, it almost, this is more sophisticated in some ways than what we used. Really, we looked at, it's about 5 seats, 3 shifts, 15 people, right? That's really what you're talking about. And again, that doesn't really do a great job of coverage. It doesn't do a great job of what do you do on weekends when people need vacations, but it's somewhere between the full and the MDR tier here in terms of what we used in our own models as what you can compare against.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And AlertLogic's model took into some stuff that I didn't even bother to put into mine, like turnover costs and hiring costs and some of those things, which are expensive, right? On the right-hand side, you can see the numbers that we put together, right? So what we did, I'm located here in San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio is a relatively cheap place to live in the US, right? And so as a result, we pulled the data based on personal experience on what we actually pay these folks and what our guidance is from HR, right? To kind of tell you how much you're going to spend for those tiers, right? So your 5-person SOC is going to cost you just shy of $700K a year, right? And as you get up into MDR, you get into that $3 million range. Then what we did is we took that and we scaled it based on cost of living to these other geos, to Denver, to Alexandria, outside DC, to San Francisco. That's not perfect, right? Like cost of living adjustment is not like the be all end all of how salaries get adjusted between geos, especially as we're all remote these days, but it'll give you some idea. And again, you can tweak all these factors and stuff like that to put in your own numbers here. But you can see obviously a significant investment in people, right? And Bharath, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about how AlertLogic's model kind of works, but you can obviously see the numbers for a similar kind of view from a different model down there at the bottom.
No, it's fair. And really what we did is we just took an average cost of an analyst, the amount to keep them, their average turnover, the amount of cost to hire an employee, and we really rolled all of that together. And we came up with a similar model. And I think the really cool thing here, and cool, not cool, however it rolls out, there's different ways to skin this cat. And really, if you look at it, they're not appreciably different. They're both arriving to the same general conclusion in the same ballpark. As you start scaling up, it's within 20% in most cases. Like this is what you're actually dealing with. So, again, right, in the same way we built our model, we armed our salespeople and some of our channel partners as well. You have the ability to tune any of these assumptions, because ultimately what we're trying to do is give you guys a feel for what it would cost to go roll your own. And I think we're going to get into this, but one of the other factors we used as well was, what is it actually going to cost you to disposition all of the alerts that your tooling is throwing out? What can your analyst handle in a day reliably? Then what if you started investing, and again now increasing your tools budget, to start increasing investment in other forms of tooling to help drive efficiencies here? How does all of that play? Because Jarret, one of the things you talked about is how do we scale up? Well, part of it is when you build your own proprietary tech, you have the ability to push things like machine learning, push things like automation, things that we're able to do at scale to achieve even greater scale. And a lot of that is also built in to the headcount numbers. So when we get asked the question, well, how is it so different from you than what we can do? Well, some of those tooling and scale benefits that we achieve are what we pass along to our customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always said that like one of the major differences between things like an MDR and internal security operation is I got enough budget to go hire 8 devs or however many that are dedicated to me, right? I've got budget to spin up an automation team to go spend all of their time thinking about it. When we built my last MDR, one of our first hires that we made was operational excellence, or OE, right? You're kind of Six Sigma folks, right? To just help constantly refine and improve the processes and scalability and training and people, and constantly learn from every bite at the apple and get better every single day, right? And those are things that most of the time, most internal security operations really just are out of reach.
Yep.
All right, so now we talked a bunch about analysts, but remember we had all these other roles in the SOC, right? So your defensive infrastructure folks, vulnerability folks, threat intel, compliance, CISO for leadership, non-security staffing, right? And so we took a bite at the apple around, well, how much do all these other folks take? Now, a lot of these are kind of half heads and various other things. It's not obviously a perfect model. Again, you'll have the spreadsheet, you can poke with it and change your assumptions how you will. But where are the folks that you need to spend money on? CISOs are expensive, right? They're difficult to hire. The average retain for a CISO now is something down to like 18 months or something like that, right? And so hiring someone who can build and run a SOC is challenging. Let alone specific expertise. Threat intelligence folks, difficult to find. Vulnerability folks are difficult to find, right? Compliance people who understand modern technology like AWS are difficult to find, right? These are all challenging roles. In mission land, we live with AWS expertise, right? So our goal is to really take the AWS expertise that we have and marry it with the security expertise that Alert Logic has, so that when a vulnerability comes up or when an alert comes up, we understand what's going on and how to respond to it in the most effective way, right? And just finding security people who understand AWS is incredibly difficult, let alone just AWS folks, right? So again, don't just think about the analysts in seat. They are incredibly important, right? And the men and women that do that job are amazing and provide a huge amount of value, but you really have to arm them with the tools that they need to be successful, right? If you're having your analysts spend all their time screwing around with tooling, then you're paying a very expensive resource to do something that they're bad at, right? So you want to make sure that you have a defensive infrastructure person whose job it is to make sure that the tooling that the SOC needs is functional all the time, right? Some of which is not always trivial to do, right? Some of these tools, for those of you that maybe have care and fed a big on-prem security analytics platform in the past or something like that, may understand how much energy can go into stuff like that. So you can get and can see the model that we did here. We kind of scaled these based on the size of the operation that you were hoping to build, and then again we went across the same geos, just to give you an idea of the extra money that you're going to spend kind of building these things, right? So now we'll talk about tooling. And to be honest, Bharath and I went back and forth a little bit on how much we wanted to talk about here. Tooling can vary really wildly based on what your business is, what type of organization you have, how old it is, right? What type of legacy you may have. Do you have on-prem? Are you all in public cloud? Are you all, do private cloud stuff, right? Using a lot of SaaS. There can be a lot of variation in what you want to do here. So, but we did want to give you a view just so that you have a final number that you can have in your head and you can see how we got here. Again, you can tweak this to match your own numbers. But what we went ahead and did is we assumed an organization with about 1,000 endpoints and 3 physical locations, right? Obviously, a lot more folks are doing fully remote these days, but 3 locations where you would put, for example, kind of network visibility type tooling, right? And so then we went through and we said, hey, look, we're not gonna do tooling for every single thing that a SOC may buy, right? There's not a lot of compliance tooling in this list, for example, but we try to compare this to the types of services that you would get from an MDR, right? So if you went and purchased an MDR, they're going to use a bunch of tooling. What types of things are you going to get, right? And for when things varied based on the cost of the analysts, so for example, threat intelligence and SOAR both vary based on how many analysts you have, we assumed that full model of 17 people. Right. So again, you're going to invest in endpoint, right? So this is going to give you at least EDR, endpoint detection response visibility, so that you can layer an MDR on top of that. Some will also give you EPP, so anti-malware, some kind of network visibility. This is a little blurry these days. A lot of platforms use endpoint to do network and various other things. Alert Logic, for example, does network visibility in AWS, but through an agent capability because of the way AWS works. That's how you have to do it, right? But you can see some of the costs here. Analytics, of course. we really limited analytics to just thinking about the data coming from this endpoint and network telemetry sensors and not trying to do anything crazy, right? If you're doing base logging for compliance, those numbers will go up. If you're doing PCAP or something, those numbers are going to go through the roof, right? So analytics here, very narrow use case, right? If you want to go do a big analytics thing, you can obviously spend millions. SOAR, we talked a lot about. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that I've had plenty of experience with analytics and SOAR in particular, and the tooling costs are the small part of the costs for both of those. I mean, usually with SOAR, the joke is a $50,000 license and a $500,000 professional services contract, and
Yeah,
and
sure.
the similar thing with analytics, right? I mean, it's sometimes it can get into science project land if you don't narrow it down, and if you do narrow it down, maybe the use cases are so limited that you're not actually getting the value out of what you're putting into it. But those two in particular, they're almost like a wolf in sheep's clothing compared to all the others.
Yeah, for sure, right? I think you can spend almost unlimited amount of money on analytics, and SOAR you can put a full dev team on, right? We've done that in operations that I've built. SOARs at the end of the day are just tools that run a bunch of Python to automate things, right? And so one, you need to be able to figure out, well, what are you trying to automate, which involves pretty sophisticated capabilities in metrics and management and OE and all those things to understand where you're spending your time and what are your common issues that you're trying to deal with, right? And then actually have to go and build that capability and keep it working when all the systems underneath it change and all that, right? There's a lot of hidden costs in those things. Here we're just talking about licensing, but I totally take your point and agree that those are challenges. And in fact, a lot of organizations that we see aren't investing in SOAR and aren't investing in Intel, right? And it's really more kind of that endpoint network analytics triad that we kind of see most often, right? We also included intelligence, right? So be this a recorded future or many of the other Intel platforms that are out there that are really great. They can give you a lot of tooling, as Bharath mentioned, but it does require specialist expertise to actually use effectively, right? Just buying these things, look, there's value in them. They do provide a lot of visibility. They provide really great reports to understand it. But much like all intelligence, it requires experts to look through all of it and figure out what parts of that intelligence matter to you and to your business. Security is a game where you can spend an unlimited amount of money on it, just like quality, right? So you've got to pick and choose where we invest our resources to have the most effect. And Intel is how you help get there, right? What adversarial attacks are you going to see against your business? Not just what's out there in the market, but what do you need to care about, right? Because if you're building all this stuff and you never see the attacks for it, then you're wasting your money, right? As opposed to being able to really apply those things that matter. So Intel is really an incredibly important part of a security operation that I tend to find gets overlooked for a lot of people who are thinking about how to build them. All right. Last but not least, I just did a quick on-call platform here, whether it's your PagerDuty or your Ops Genies or whatever it is, but if you're going to be on call, it is a 24/7, 365 operation. There's never a time when security gets to go to bed. You're always going to have folks that are there, and sometimes these can be really challenging. One thing I talk about with customers sometimes is to actually start to game out what it would look like to deal with an incident. Right? People tend to think about handling tickets, right? And that's great. You got to think about that. But what happens if there's an incident? What happens if there's one that lasts a week or 2 weeks or a month, right? Like if it's all hands on deck when you do an incident, you actually can't continue to do that, right? People have to sleep, people have families, right? You can't ask that of your staff. So how do you handle it, right? And maybe it only happens once a year, but if you can't handle it, it's all much, much, much worse, right?
Well, and then what ends up happening is you get backed up everywhere else, or you end up in that situation where I'm just going to hope nothing happened in this chunk, and I'm going to get back to keeping up with everything fresh.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So if we pull all this together, all the different models that we talked about, so look at the security analytics model and security analyst model, look at all the support staffing, look at all that tooling. Again, you can see our kind of assumptions over there on the left. These are where these numbers come from. So when you get on the phone with some salesperson and they go, building a SOC is $5 to $10 million, this is what they're quoting for you. Right? These are where these numbers come from, right? And I would say that both of these models are relatively conservative. Having built 2 MDRs right now, I would say that I spent a lot more than that on both of them. Right? Now, we were building operations on behalf of customers. They are bigger and more sophisticated. But at the end of the day, like, it's expensive. And the percentage increase in security salaries year over year makes you want to cry a little bit when you're the guy who owns the budget or the girl who owns the budget here. So definitely one of those things where it's like, look, I want to give you some guidance. We want you to let you know, but this is one of those things that given a $5 million bill, I wouldn't be super confident in being able to build the great SOC that I want. Right?
And we talked about this as well, right? You don't even have to get into the tooling, which you've kept neutral across all four of these. You can almost just have the headcount conversation and what that headcount is capable of handling. And then you can see that even what you've got budgeted to staff without the right scaling factors that can be delivered by better tooling, you're not able to keep up with the load that your existing workforce is generating. Forget doing above and beyond activities, proactive threat hunting. Jarret, you talked a lot about proactive versus reactive. Ultimately, for most security professionals, I mean, you as a CISO, right? You want to gauge your organization on how much proactive work is happening, not just how reactive they are. So if you're perpetually and continually behind the eight ball, and you can get to that story just from a headcount perspective, it becomes very evident that help is needed, right?
Yeah, 100%, right? Like, I've got security tickets that are going to come, security incidents that are going to come into my organization as a CISO, and I'm responsible for handling those. And we will do that. And I will get a grand total of no credit for it from senior leadership because that's the job they hired us to do, right? Where it matters is, am I supporting new product launches? Am I supporting go to market? Am I in the business saying, here's how security and compliance is going to help this business meet its objectives next year? You got a revenue number over there. Here's how I'm going to help you get there, right? That's the stuff that matters to us. That's how we play at a business level, right? Otherwise, you're just some person in the corner who catches tickets, and every year you got to beg for scraps from the budget table, right? Because you're not critical to the business. You're just a thing that has to be done, not a thing that anybody wants to do, right? So if you can start to really get down that path, you can really make yourself more valuable to the business, right?
Or there's a catastrophic incident and your successor will have more budget.
That's always true. Yes. Yeah. There will be more spending after I get fired for sure. All right, last slide. I should have mentioned up front, but we are happy to answer questions. There is a Q&A section in the webinar. Please feel free to type them in there. Bharath and I are happy to hang on here for a few minutes, and when we're done, and answer questions if some good ones come across. So take a second if there's something that you would like us to go in a little more depth on, and we're happy to do it. But otherwise, our last slide here, right? And we just wanted to touch on a couple of things, kind of wrap up, right? That when we talk about a SOC, I think it's important to think about an effective SOC. Right, building a SOC that is not effective is almost worse than useless, because now you have a false sense of security when you're not actually delivering anything. A SOC is not, Bob that used to do database work, and now Bob has, the whatever security tool du jour portal and a TV on the wall. That's not a SOC, right? SOCs require capability, they require maturity and process, and they require depth of execution. Right? Otherwise, you just got some people, and those people are great, and there's no denigration to the work that they try to do, right? But you're not really building a SOC at that point, or at least not an effective one, right? As we saw today, with all the resources that are required to build one, most organizations can't allocate these resources. It's not there, right? $5 to $10 million is not a 10% increase in budget. It's a 10x increase in budget. It's not going to happen, not on the table, right? And that's why you see the Gartners of the world kind of coming to terms with, as Bharath mentioned, just really saying, like, yeah, this is where everybody's going to go, because you actually just can't do it. Because even if you have the money, you can't do it, right? The amount of effort and difficulty to hire and to retain this talent is very, very hard. Now, is there ever a time in which it makes sense for people to build SOCs? 100% it does. Right? At the end of the day, if you go out to the market and you get an MDR, you will never get an operation that can be as tuned to your business as a custom built one. That is true, right? But most organizations don't need that, right? But if you do, that's fine. If you're Goldman Sachs or Bank of America and you have this risk and you need to go do that, great. Right? If you're SpaceX out there and, well, you build rockets, but rockets on their side are missiles, so there's a lot of people who are very interested in your designs, yeah, having your own SOC probably makes a lot of sense, because the type of threat model that you have as an organization justifies that, right? And that should go all the way up through your senior leadership team. If your CEO is not going, hey, we should probably have our own SOC, then why on earth are you building one, right? They are incredibly painful. But we do see some people who really are interested in doing this, just because, there's still some people who kind of measure their importance to the business based on how much headcount and how much budget they have. And it's like, look, I get that, right? But this is one of those apples that's a tough bite. So as a result, as we mentioned, MDRs are increasing in popularity. including enterprises. This isn't just an SMB mid-market kind of play. All the way up through small, medium, even very large enterprises are looking at MDR, because MDRs like Alert Logic can build such an optimized operation. They can deliver that capability at a much lower price than you can do yourself. And so even if you're going to go build a security operation, you're far better off pairing that with an MDR than trying to replicate an MDR.
Yeah, so Jarret, our enterprise customers are very much like that. We are not their full security footprint. We're a portion of their security estate, where they're taking their people and specializing them to more business-centric things, and they're leaving the broad detection, across their IT estate. That's our part of the security puzzle. Whereas if you go down into some of the SMBs and kind of entry mid-market, we are doing all of their detection work for them. So, like, hey, I'm not going into the console, I'm waiting for you to call me, right? That's how they're using us. Whereas the larger enterprise ones are always in our console, always messaging up, executive reporting. I mean, all of that matters to them. So again, it's how they leverage the same tech.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so as we mentioned, don't trust us. We will give you access to the model here, I guess probably after this webinar is over if we haven't sent it out already. Just a simple Excel spreadsheet, right? There's nothing magic to it. Go in there. You'll be able to understand how it works. It's not hard, right? Plug in your own numbers, right? Like, go talk to your HR team. Have them tell you how much it would cost to hire people. We assumed a 30% burning assumption. Maybe you guys are 20, maybe you guys are 50, right? So tweak the model. If you don't agree with how many people we think should be in a SOC, go put the ones in that you think you should be in there, right? So, go convince yourself of what the numbers say, to give you a little bit of a leg up on what it would take to get there, right? And then last but not least here, don't forget all of the teams that have to be involved in making that SOC successful, right? Remember, it's not just about paying for the SOC, it's about making sure that all those teams are scaled correctly. And that's really why Mission and Alert Logic have gotten together to deliver services for our customers, because Mission has great 24/7 capabilities in AWS, right? And Alert Logic has great 24/7 capabilities on the security side, right? And so by pairing those things together, right, if you just have AWS experience, you don't have 24/7 security expertise, and you're not monitoring and investigating those alerts. You're not getting that proactive capability, right? And if you just have security, then what happens when security shows up and goes, well, bad stuff's happening, you should do something about it, right? And then you kind of all look at each other and go, well, who's going to do that? I don't know how to do that, right? And so then, having those teams put together really is what drives it. I think, Bharath, you mentioned earlier that customers tend to focus on capabilities and lose sometimes the outcome, right? The outcome of a security operation is to stop an adversary, kick the adversary out of the environment before they damage the business. That is the outcome. Just detecting the adversary is not an outcome, right? We still got work. We still got to respond to them, right? So, peanut butter and jelly, right? Better together than separate. And so that's why we really push these two organizations together, and we find that customers get a lot of value out of that combination.
I mean, certainly embedding security is better than bolting it on. And that, I think, is really the benefit that we're getting here. You're basically shifting the security discussion left into the build portion of what you're doing. So if you're comprehending it, contemplating it, acting on it at the beginning, you're going to be in a much better position when you get to the end, versus bolting it on and figuring out what broke, having to go back and fix it, tune it. I mean, we've had so many customers that we've talked to specifically in this environment where embedding security on the front end has allowed them a competitive advantage in getting to market faster than their competitors who aren't doing the same thing, both of them delivering everything through AWS.
Yeah, 100%, right? And like, we believe in it enough that in our managed service operation, we call it Cloud One, which is our process that we monitor and maintain customer infrastructure on AWS. We've actually embedded what we call Cloud Secure, which is our NDR operation powered by Alert Logic. It's just in there, right? Because we believe that every customer kind of needs it for those environments. So, all right, well, to wrap up here, we did want to say Alert Logic and Mission have gotten together for a free offering for you guys. So if you want to continue this conversation, like, let's do it in the context of your environment. So give us a call. We will do a free security assessment of your AWS environment. Mission will be on the phone, as well as Alert Logic folks, and we'll really start taking a deep look at where you are and start talking about where you might need to go or how we can help you get there. Right. So if that's interesting, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to set that up. All right. So I'm looking through our Q&As. If there's any last minute ones, feel free to ask here. I don't see any on the top of it. Bharath, any final thoughts here before we let everybody go on with their day?
I mean, this is something that both of our organizations are very passionate about helping customers succeed. So I certainly encourage you to to reach out. I mean, it's a conversation we love to have. Improving your security posture in AWS is certainly something that both of our organizations value deeply, and it's something that we've had countless examples of customers that are just in a much better place than they were before, and we want you to join that club.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Bharath, for spending some time with us. We really appreciate your expertise and your viewpoint here from Alert Logic. Thank you, everybody, for spending time with us. Again, I know it's always hard to carve an hour out of your day to listen to people talk, but hopefully this has been valuable to you. If you have any questions about the model, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk a little bit about it. It's pretty simple, though. I think you'll be all right with it. And have a good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you happen to be. So thanks again, everybody.